Welcome to Do You Approve This Groove, a project where two old friends dive headfirst into the 500 greatest albums of all time and beyond. We're going to relive them like we're trading the ultimate mixtape, one legendary record at a time. Each episode, we take a deep dive into iconic albums, rediscover their magic, and see if they hold up after all of these years. We'll rank each album and open up our hot takes for discussion. So whether you're hearing it for the first time or for the 100th, whether you agree or disagree, we're turning the volume up and bringing you along for the ride. In this episode, we count down albums 470 through 461. We learn that Kyle loves African jam bands. Apparently, we both love 2000s R&B and both hate 2000s indie. It's a shocker. There's more that we didn't like in this crop of albums than we did, so there's that. I'm Tyler, and he's Kyle. Let's talk about some music.
All right, back again. Tyler, we've got another chunk of albums to listen to that we've been listening to this week that we're going to talk about. How's everything going on your end?
Things are going. It is almost February break up in Western New York. So we haven't really talked about this, I suppose, but I work at a school, and it's that typical week before break. It's been a long week.
Yeah.
Today felt like it was 3 days long, so I'm looking forward to tomorrow being Friday. We're recording this on a Thursday night. Tomorrow's a Friday, right before break. It's gonna be fun. So, how about you?
Well, I unfortunately don't work at a school anymore, so I'll be working all week next. Well, I got Monday off, but
I'll be working next week too. But yes,
yeah, same old. Not this was a lot of music to listen to this time, so I think we're gonna have a lot to talk about. We're either gonna have a lot to talk about this week or just not much to talk about this week. I'm not sure which way it's gonna fall, because it was an interesting.
This was an eclectic group of albums, and I started listening to this in full transparency. I listened to a lot of this right around Christmas time. And some of it was very passive, it was just on in the background.
Yeah.
So as I revisited some of these, I had to fight my first takes on them, where I remember being like, there was nothing from this that I enjoyed. So I was like, okay, I'll give it another listen. And I don't know if I ever came around to any of these. So I mean, maybe a couple, but yeah, it'll be interesting to hash these out and to go through them.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. I'm the same boat. I listened to these even longer ago, October, November, and came back to them in the last week. And I think I did come around to a couple, but overall, yeah, it was tough.
Yeah. And like you said, it's a the chunks of 10 that we're doing, there's been a lot of variation in there. This felt like it was all over the place. And a lot of it was, looking at, a lot of it was very unfamiliar.
Spoiler though, I do have another 5 on this list for this week.
You told me that, and I was looking at the list going what one? So I'm interested to get to that one. Well, let's jump into it.
All right, here we go.
The 470th greatest album of all time, according to Rolling Stone magazine, is 400 Degrees, the American rapper Juvenile. This is coming from Universal Records, released on November 3rd, 1998. This was also one of the biggest and earliest recordings from Cash Money Studios, which I am sure we will hear from again, just based on the names on this album, the featured list on this album. This album is just over 72 minutes long. Oh, what did you think of 400 Degrees?
This was like middle school, right? Like for us, this was just straight up middle school. I mean, Back That Ass Up is, for me, that was the only song that I knew coming into this album. Really, certainly. Yes. If you were alive in 1998, you know that song.
If you went to middle school dances and high school dances in the late 90s, then yes, you absolutely knew that song.
Yeah, I came away from the album feeling like that's still my favorite song on the album. Everything else, like I liked the beats. The beats were kind of fun to listen to. It had energy. It was fun to listen to. There were some great bass lines throughout it, but I can see how people were into this album, especially at the time. But it wasn't for me. It just happened. It was just an album, I guess.
Yeah, and the album's credited a lot with putting the, as I mentioned before, the New Orleans kind of collective on the map. So while the album is credited with being by Juvenile, it features Lil Wayne prominently. Obviously it's not his first recordings, but um, I mean, I was not aware, partially because of my own ignorance and tastes, but I was not aware of Lil Wayne until probably 2007 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it hip hop just wasn't my thing, and I just wasn't looking for it. So it was interesting. Like we said, I knew Back That Ass Up for sure. Um, but as I listened to it, I was like, damn, Lil Wayne's all over this. And then, as I read about it, I was like, okay, well, that makes more sense. Yeah, I mean, I had a similar take to it. Like, this is one of those albums to me where I think that it's on the list because of the style of hip hop that it brought to the forefront, which is
Mm-hmm.
that southern version of it that Lil Wayne's obviously a part of, Juvenile's obviously a part of. Outkast was before this, and had been very prominent leading up to this, but definitely just a different style. Um, so I think it's on the list for its contribution to
Yeah.
the genre
Yeah.
more than anything, because I mean the songs aren't really that memorable. Um, I think, again, I just think that they're probably just influential.
Yeah.
So it's included on the list, which I understand, I respect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't take a whole lot from this one. Back That Ass Up is a banger. It just is.
Did it feel did it feel dated to you, the album?
Yes.
Okay. That was kind of the
Yeah.
impression that I had. It just, I mean, it
And that's
it
and
felt like 1998. And not
right.
not necessarily to any detriment, but it felt when he's making like references to Shaq on the Lakers. I'm like, yeah, this was a while ago.
Yeah. And also, as being one of the most prominent entries into this specific subgenre, I guess, which on Wikipedia it's labeled as Southern hip hop. Um, Obviously, the genre has continued to evolve and take from it those influences, and I think the influences that have stuck around and evolved and continued to the untrained ear, which I think you and I are in this genre, we recognize that, but we're also like, but we've heard that for 20 years now, like in the songs that you and I have come across. So to me, again, there was nothing revolutionary. The anecdote or the metaphor, I suppose, connection, I don't know, whatever, that I would draw to it is I didn't read Catcher in the Rye until I was like a senior in college,
Yeah.
right? I don't know if I've ever told you this. And I read it because I was an emo kid and I felt like I should. And when I read it, I understood Holden's perspective. I was like, yes, this is how for the most part, this is how I think and how most of my friends think. I don't understand why this book is so revolutionary. And then when you step back and you're like, well, it was published at this time and everything was, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Or I guess another parallel would be like if you grew up knowing the Star Wars story, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's just so ubiquitous, and yeah, and I'm your father, yeah, I got it, and yoda, da, da, da. And then you sit down like I did later in life to watch the Star Wars movies. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
this is yeah,
That's what it is.
whatever,
Yeah.
right? So that's how I guess I felt like listening to this album. It was like, okay, what
Yeah.
yeah, this is not revolutionary to me.
Yeah. It
Like
wasn't like
this is
shocking or surprising
I
in
get.
any way.
Yeah. Which again, like as you look back and you say, well, I bet it's on the list because of its contributions. I have no choice but to believe them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, now, while we were not blown away by this album. A lot of people were. This album went 4 times platinum. It's in. It says in here that in 2024, this album was ranked 38th and 44th in their best respective all-time best hip hop albums list. So this is a widely respected album. It went 4 times platinum in the U.S. It charted as high as 9 on the U.S. Billboard 200 and as high as 2 on the top R&B and hip hop albums. So it definitely charted. Like we said, I mean, Back That Ass Up is still played, rightfully so. And it was inescapable. I mean, I remember like going to the 4-H dances, dude, and like,
I was just
yeah,
gonna say something about the 4-H dances. Yeah.
and we talked about this when we talked about Boys to Men, but it's like, really, we're playing this for 12-year-olds, like,
Yeah.
they say that when you go to school, you learn more on the bus than you do in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of those songs, man, where people learn a lot.
Yep.
People
Yep.
learned a lot.
And they weren't fooling anybody with the radio edit of that song either.
It's so funny you say that because I don't remember a radio edit.
No.
No, like it to me, there is like it was so clear what they were saying that it was not edited.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
there was never a mystery to me about what the actual lyrics were.
No.
So I don't know anything we haven't uncovered in this one.
No, no. I gave it a 2.5 just because of that. I recognize the influence and the impact that it had, but I'm not gonna put it on again. If it does come on, like, oh yeah, okay. Like, I'm not gonna rush to shut it off, but it was fine.
Agreed. I'd go with the 2.52 because the only song that would have me come back to it is Back That Ass Up. I
Hmm.
mean, they can back that song up whenever they want. But yeah, I mean, unless I was in the mood to really be like, oh, I wonder what Lil Wayne sounded like back in the day. I'm not gonna revisit this one. Um, but yeah, that was what was it? 400 Degrees from Juvenile et al. The next album on the list at 469 is Manu Chao. I think that's how you'd say it. Manu Chao's album Clandestino. This album was released in 1998. It's classified as reggae rock, which I think is a little interesting. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. This came out. It says this came out through Virgin, but I think it came out through so many imprints. Because this is not like a commercial banger. Not even close. Um, but ultimately it falls under the Virgin umbrella. It's 45 minutes and 51 seconds long. It's produced by Manu Chao and Renaud Letong. This is his first album in his discography. It's also included in the book 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. And it doesn't look like it was on the list of albums in any of Rolling Stone's previous iterations, but it is on the list from 2020. Kyle,
Hmm.
what did you think of Clandestino?
Um, so I went back. I was interested in that word clandestino. And in the description that, like, on the Rolling Stone website, it said that it's a it's a derogatory word for undocumented migrants.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciated hearing that because it gave me some sort of frame to come into this album with, because it's very largely not English, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he's Spanish speaking, French speaking, a little bit of English, but all of it kind of sprinkled together. So having some sort of frame to come into it with, even though I didn't know the lyrics really, it's an album with a message, and I can always appreciate an album with a message.
Did you get into any of the like the lyric translations or
I
anything, or
didn't. I didn't.
didn't look that far?
No, I thought about it. But I didn't. Just because I wanted to let the album exist as it was for me in that way. Yeah, no, maybe I should have. Is that something you looked into?
Did
No,
not.
no.
But I read more about him because this was one of those albums where I was like, why is this on the list? I don't understand. Musically, I didn't think there was anything revolutionary about it. And then I was reading about him, and I kind of got an appreciation for him, I guess. Um, he's like mostly a busker that had a band, and he traveled around and played. And when
Mm-hmm.
you listen to this, there's a lot that makes a lot of sense.
No, I was that I kept seeing that digital busker moniker, like
Yeah.
title given to it too, and that was one thing that I had noted down was that it kind of listening to this album does kind of feel like you're walking through, a city, and he's a dude on a corner playing this music
Hmm.
for you.
And when I heard or when I read that and I listened to some of the stuff, I it made more sense because this was largely recorded by him and processed or produced on a laptop that he called what I just saw it, Clandestino Studio, like
Hmm.
that, like it was just very much like in his own world. And through that lens, I could definitely like there's a lot of stuff that was looped or could have been looped.
Yeah.
And then when you think of like buskers and that sort of vibe, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like this was him playing 8 bars or something and looping it, and then playing and writing songs over that loop and putting in melodies on lead guitar, stuff like that. One of the things that stood out to me was the overdubbed lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm not the vocals.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not, sometimes they're on the same note and melody, and sometimes they're split. And it definitely added depth, and I think that that's probably a clever way when you're recording with probably a microphone and a laptop, like a clever way to add a little bit of depth where it doesn't just feel like you're recording in a closet.
Right.
One of the songs that stuck out to me was Bongo Bong,
I
which is one of the
Yep.
few I think that's in English,
Yep, I had that
right?
one noted down too.
It's just like this silly sounding song. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know that it was a single, but I mean, it was probably the most approachable. Maybe it was because it was in English, but um, and it reminded me of like just a very silly song, like
Mm-hmm.
and very 90s,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
90s.
I wrote down that it was simple but engaging. Like it wasn't overly
Hmm.
complex. There wasn't a ton going on, but it kept my attention.
Yeah. The other song that I thought was kind of interesting was "Welcome to Tijuana."
Mm-hmm.
Just because there's like a super deep vocal, "Welcome to Tijuana," like it's just it's weird. um so I don't know. Obviously this guy is a guy that is pretty transient. He travels a lot. I mean, he's an artist. Like this album got a lot of respect, I think, because of the style of artist he is. I mean, he's basically untethered and just like wrote music and performed it. It didn't matter what language. Like as you said, there's Spanish, English, and French. Some of the song titles are in English. Some of them are in French. Some of them are in Spanish. Um, it's this is a hard record to classify. Like
Yeah.
I said, it's listed as reggae rock. I don't. I mean, I'm not really familiar with what exactly they call reggae rock, but I didn't hear a lot of reggae in it. Mostly acoustic guitar, some production on there, and vocals. Like
Mm-hmm.
pretty simple. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you rate this one?
I gave it a 3. I mean, I honestly liked it. Like I enjoyed it enough that I would probably put it back on if I was in the right mood. It's not something that's like gonna go into a rotation that I would just let play in any situation. But if I was in the right mood, I would come back to it.
I would give this one a 2. In that I heard it, I don't feel like I need to hear it again. It didn't leave me with a lot. Um, it it did do really well in France. Um, which again I think was his home country. I think he was a Spanish speaker that grew up in France or
Yeah.
French parents or something like that. Um, it went diamond in France, some gold in some other European countries, 2 times platinum in Switzerland. Um, but it doesn't register as selling at all, at least on Wikipedia, in the U.S. Which, it, that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just
Mm-hmm.
this isn't something that many people in the U.S. have ever heard, probably, unless they really went looking for it. I, this was one of those, like I mentioned before, that I don't know why it's on the list, other than a lot of people must respect, a lot of the people that contributed to the list respect him and his style. Um, in reading, I couldn't even really figure out exactly how it like inspired others or like led to others or anything like that. Um, but I did find out that he's still making music.
Oh,
I
really?
mean, the guy released an album this year.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so good for you, Manny Chao. Keep doing you. That was Clandestino from Manny Chao in its 469. The next album on the list is from a somewhat more known artist than Manny Chao. I don't know, Kyle. I don't know if you'd heard of them before this project, but this is from a band from the UK. This album is called "Some Girls from the Rolling Stones."
Hmm.
So sorry, the Rolling Stones. Yeah, um, "Some Girls from the Rolling Stones." I think you've heard of
Didn't
him.
they make this list that we're listening to?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Um, ha ha ha. Um, the Rolling Stones released "Some Girls" on June 9th, 1978, from Pathé Marconi Studios in Paris. It's 40 minutes and 45 seconds long on Rolling Stones label. Self-produced. Well, not self-produced, sorry, self-released. Producer, the Glimmer Twins, who that is a name that I'm not familiar with that I want to know more about.
That's
The Glimmer Twins?
that's Keith Richards and Mick Jagger. Like that's their
Then there
writing.
we go.
Yeah, that's their writing name.
So they owned this altogether. Good for you for knowing that. I didn't know that. That'll be on Jeopardy someday. Um, yeah, this album. I mean, it's a Rolling Stones record, but it's definitely different too. What are your impressions of this album?
So I before I get too far into this album in particular, how wild is it that it's 2025 and the Rolling Stones apparently put out an album last year that I didn't even know existed, and they won the freaking best rock album Grammy in 2025. Like, yeah,
What?
yeah, exactly.
Jeez.
The Rolling Stones won the best rock album Grammy in 2025. I don't even know. I off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you the name of the album. I didn't even know they put out an album anytime recently. But
I'm dying to know who else was nominated in the category right now.
I forget. I
But
remember
yeah,
like
they won the
Idols.
Grammy for Best Rock Album. I've heard of Idols.
Yeah,
Uh-huh. Anyways, keep going. I'm gonna
yeah,
look that up
yeah.
as you tell us about this.
But I mean, this album, Some Girls, it had some big hits, right? Like
Hmm.
my I appreciate the Rolling Stones from like their earlier eras when they were a lot more bluesy, rocky. And this was not that really. Like this album, they took a lot of influences from a lot of other places. Like that Miss You is probably, I certainly, just by Imagination, which was a Temptations cover, that was on this album. Beast of Burden, Shattered, like those are all big songs from this album. But Miss You is, probably one of their bigger songs, and it's basically a disco song. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's very obvious that they took a lot of influence from a lot of different places on this album, and it like I don't want to say it didn't work, but it didn't like drive me up the wall. Like I just was like, all right, it's cool. I mean, I like Keith Richards kind of riffy guitar work. I've never really cared for Mick Jagger's voice. It's
Yep.
not my thing. Um, Charlie Watts is the best part of the Rolling Stones. Like he is an unsung hero in rock music. He
Hmm.
was a phenomenal jazz drummer, and the work that he did with the Rolling Stones undersold how talented of a drummer he was. But this album in general, like it was just it was okay. I don't know.
Yeah. I this is another one of those albums where the hits are the hits,
Mm-hmm.
like you mentioned. I mean, those songs are. And what I thought was interesting is like Beast of Burden is, I mean, it's a universal song. But I also thought it was interesting that I mean, it's the ninth track on the song or on the album, and then Shattered is one that got played on classic radio or gets played on classic radio quite a bit. It's a to me kind of a goofy sounding song. But that's also the 10th song on this album. So there's a lot of stuff in the middle. Like Miss You is the lead off track, and it starts really strong. And then there's stuff in the middle that I had not heard of. Um, 'Cause again, I didn't grow up in a house where we were playing like Rolling Stones records, so I heard what was on classic rock radio. Um, my first thought when I listened to this, I was driving around with my daughter in Florida trying to find gas, and my first notes to myself were like, "This sounds like the Rolling Stones are trying to do like a country album." And I think it's because it's some of those songs in the middle. There's some of that twanging guitar and
Yeah, for
some
sure.
storytelling and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And then a couple weeks ago, I put it on again um, when I was playing Mario Kart, um, as you do. And Some Girls came on, and I actually had the chance to listen to it, and I heard the lyrics, and I was like, "Boy, this does not age well." Um, and what's funny is that Some Girls has an explicit marking next to it, um, and man, cancel culture missed Mick. Good for him, because I mean there are some sweeping sexist generalizations about whole races of women, ethnicities of women in general. And it was like, I just remember thinking, I was like, why would you write that song? Like, I don't, I mean, maybe he was just in an F you, like, I can say what I want kind of mood. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be interested. But it's the title track. Like, so
Yeah.
obviously there
Not
was some
just
thought in it.
not just something that they slipped in the record somewhere, but like it's
Right.
like
There's
drawing
some
attention
thought
right
to
to
it.
it.
Absolutely. I don't know. It was interesting. Some of the notes on here say that in the in the mid '60s, the Rolling Stones were on a decline. Disco and pop songs were kind of starting to take over. Um, so it seems like they tried to kind of bridge the gap a little bit.
Hmm.
Give the people what they want, sort of stuff. This is their 14th studio album, which is pretty nuts. Um, yeah, there's controversy around its cover artwork, work and lyrical content at the time, even. But it was a commercial success, peaking at number 2 in the UK and number 1 in the US. Um, became the band's top-selling album in the US. 6 million copies, so that's 6 times platinum in the US. So when you think about like the Rolling Stones, the first songs that come to mind from the Rolling Stones, East of Burden might be one of them.
Hmm.
Um, I think for me, it's probably You Can't Always Get What You Want. That's the
Hmm.
song that I would probably think of as the Rolling Stones first, or
Satisfaction.
Satisfaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like those were big songs on other albums that didn't sell as well. This album sold really well, and it says that this was their rebound after an album that's probably not on the list, called Black and Blue, and then this was credited with kind of bringing them back. It became the only Rolling Stones album to be nominated for a Grammy Award in the Album of the Year category. And as obviously for the reason we're talking about it, it's listed on this list and others.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it was interesting. This is probably one of the bigger names um, that we've heard from,
So far,
and
yeah.
a band that like we know will be on the list again for
Yeah.
other things. Um, so I don't know. It was a weird thing to just kind of digest for me, anyways. 'Cause again,
Yeah.
the songs I know are so good, and the others are just okay.
Just yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head though when you were saying that it it was kind of an album that they did to give the people what they want, to meet the audience where they were at this time in the mid to late 70s with the pop and disco and that sort of thing. And I mean, that's probably some sort of reason why why it was so successful. I mean,
Yeah.
they gave the people what they wanted.
Yeah, and I wonder there's also a good chance that the idea of any publicity is good publicity. As I was reading about this one, this album caught the attention of the Reverend Jesse Jackson
Hmm.
for the lyrical content of Some Girls, who
Oh,
said that this song is a racial insult. Um, so I wonder, and I mean, and the band is, which you probably wouldn't be surprised about. Mick Jagger himself didn't really like shy away from that or apologize. He's quoted as saying, "As I've always said, if you can't take a joke, it's too effing bad." Um, so, I suppose that there's some degree of, yo, did you hear this new Rolling Stones record? Like they said, so this song is crazy. Like,
yeah.
and so people bought it just
To
to
hear, yeah.
experience it. Because again, if they weren't playing that song on the radio, which it's entirely a song that they didn't play that song on the radio, the only way you're going to hear it back there was
It's,
I'm buying the LP.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's the
You
only way to do it.
didn't pull it up on Spotify.
It wasn't trending audio on TikTok, so um, and probably a good thing about that. Yeah, we talked about kind of some of the sales already. Um, it definitely did the best in the U.S., as many of the albums on the list do. Um, but on the charts around the world in 1978, from the countries that are listed, its lowest ranking for peak position was 11th in Finland and Japan. All of the other spots it charted in the top 10 single digits, including, as we mentioned, I think in the US at number one on the Billboard 200. Number one in Canada, number two in the UK. Like, I mean, this was an album that moved some units and had some spins on the old radio. I think led by its singles, but again, probably spurned on by some of the controversy. What did you give this record?
A 3. I mean, I
Yeah.
respect the hell out of it for some of those huge hits that it has.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely had some misses as well. I don't think we're ever going to escape some of those songs. Some of those songs are going to be around forever. So
I would probably give it a 3 too. Maybe a 3.5 just because those three songs that we've talked about specifically are pretty good. I have a weird relationship with the Rolling Stones. And mom, if you ever listen to this, I hope you'll laugh. Um, I've always thought that my maternal grandmother like looked like Mick Jagger. Um, and I don't know why. Like it's unkind to say because she didn't exactly, but in my mind, when I was younger, she had a similar haircut and she smoked a lot and she was pretty skinny and like that's really where it ended. But to a young, like maybe 6-year old, like
hmm
I was like, my grandmother looks like Mick Jagger. So so I've always just kind of like I don't know, like I've always thought of them as like a weird sort of like just connection in my brain. It's I don't know, it's just weird. So I've never been a huge Rolling Stones fan. I don't know, it's just weird. Anyways, shout out Grandma Vicky. Um, yeah. Anything we didn't talk about with this one?
No, I think we covered it.
We covered it. That was Some Girls from the Rolling Stones in at 468. Next on the list is the artist Maxwell's album Black Summer's Night. This was released on July 7th, 2009 from Columbia Records. It is 37 minutes and 21 seconds long, produced by Muse, aka Maxwell himself, and Had David. This is his fourth studio album. I'm interested to talk about this one.
Yeah,
What did you think?
straight banger.
Yes,
I loved this album.
yes.
I loved this.
I
I
I was so surprised by this one.
yes, yeah. I The only thing that held me back from a 5 is that it's too damn short. Like if he gave us like maybe 3 more songs, like 12 more minutes of music, I probably would have put it at a 5. I didn't know Maxwell. I knew the name. I didn't wasn't familiar with the music, and this was good. This was good. It was soulful and vibey and just like this R&B groove. I loved I loved that for the most part, not entirely, not 100%, but I loved that so much of it was a live band playing.
Mm-hmm.
Not programmed beats, not, that sort of, it was a live band playing, and his voice was just perfect. Um, yeah, this was good. I liked this a lot.
That's awesome. I think one of the things that's interesting, I think is interesting, is that you and I, especially for this round, haven't shared our ratings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're going into this not knowing what each other is thinking,
Hmm.
and we're generally pretty close, within a point or two for the points that don't matter. Um, so as we started talking about this one, I was like, I wonder what he thinks. And I had this like the exact same takeaway from it. Um, I don't recall hearing his name. I don't recall hearing any of his music. I might have. And I remember very specifically listening to this one as we were driving north, coming out of Charleston, South Carolina. I put it on, and very quickly I was like, "This is sweet!" Like I
Hmm.
expected this to be another one of the R&B type crooner albums that
Yep.
was just kind of smooth, and like you said, the music really surprised me about this one. The vocals were great, but the music itself I thought was sweet.
It was alive. Was the best way
Yeah,
that I
yeah, yeah,
could
yeah.
say it. Like it felt like I always appreciate an album that makes me feel like I'm listening to a live performance. Whether it's,
Hmm.
a band that tracks an album live in the studio together, even if they don't do that, if whatever it is, however they're producing it, however they're recording it, makes it feel that way, that grabs me, and that's something that I got out of this. I felt like I was sitting in on a live performance listening to this.
Yeah, the song that stuck out to me most um, is the sixth song, "Love You." It starts off with a piano chord, um, and we've talked about how before, like for some reason, I just have a Rolodex of sounds in my head, and I heard this and immediately was like, "This sounds like a Childish Gambino song." From in general, it sounds like the music from a lot of Childish Gambino songs, but specifically from his album Camp. And then as I heard it more and the piano, the song specifically, and I would be willing to bet that it starts with the exact same chord to the point where I don't know if they sampled it or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's the song "Hold You Down" from Childish Gambino on his album Camp. Um, but because of that, I immediately gravitated to that song. The song "Cold" I thought was really good. There's this album had 4 singles that came off of it, and again, I think that's awesome
Yeah,
considering that I never heard it before.
there wasn't
Um,
a song on this album that I was familiar with before listening to it.
right, right. Um, yeah, I really liked it. This is I. So did you get a 4.5?
I gave it a 4. I didn't. I mean, I guess
You
I.
gave it a
I.
4.
I mean,
Okay,
I could go up to a 4.5. Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
You
definitely.
gave
I'm
it a 4. I
strong 4. Yeah.
I would give this probably a 4 also. There's enough here, and I think enough to unpack and appreciate that I would definitely put some of the songs on, and as I shuffled through them, like leave the others on and enjoy them.
Hmm.
Um, this is a good one. I
Yeah.
really like this one. Um, it did well critically. It topped the U.S. Billboard 200. It was at number one there, and it topped the R&B hip hop albums. It went platinum in the U.S. Um, I mean, it was a critical and commercial success. Again, for an album that this was not that long ago, and I didn't know this album existed. I mentioned before, like this was also pretty much transition, I guess, a little more into post-hardcore at this point. But like I would not have looked for this or been in a place where it would have come across my ears. But I enjoyed checking this one out.
Yeah.
It earned Maxwell 2 Grammy Awards at the 52nd Grammys. Um, this it was a smash. I mean, sure,
I can see
rightfully
that. Yeah,
placed on the list.
I can see why.
It was cool. I enjoyed it. Anything we didn't talk about with this one?
No, no. I appreciate that you brought up Childish Gambino because I'm gonna bring him up later.
All right,
Yeah.
cool. Teaser. There we
Yeah.
go. Sweet. That was Black Summer's Night from Maxwell in at 467. The 466th greatest album of all time is entitled Red by the group Black Uhuru. This is a Jamaican reggae band. This album was released it was released in 1981. It's their second album. It's 39 minutes and 24 seconds long. Mango, Island, and Warner Brothers Records. Produced by Sly and Robbie. This is squarely within the reggae genre. No ifs and or buts there. Um, Kyle, what did you think of Red?
It's not Bob Marley.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I just say that because that's the extent of my reggae exposure, really, like in any significant way. So this is definitely something that was very new
I mean,
to
you
me.
are a bald head. You are a
I
bald head.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
not a natty boy.
I'm
You are
not.
not a natty boy.
No, no. I so like I appreciate music that represents other cultures and does it directly in a way that's not like an Americanized version of something that is inspired by something from another culture or region of the world, something like that. Not trying to appease an American audience. I think to go back to that Manu Chao album, that's part of what I liked about that too. Was that
Mm-hmm.
it is very authentically its thing, which is what I
Mm-hmm.
felt about this. Ultimately, I'm not a huge. I guess I'm just not a big reggae fan. Um,
Interesting.
there are things that I like about it, but there are things like it's just not all that exciting for me. I'm also not a big ska fan. Like as much as I was into, various
Less than Jake.
iterations. Yeah, yeah. I mean as much as I was into like various, you know, peripheral punk sounds, especially when I was younger, ska was never
Mm-hmm.
one of them that I was really into.
Sure.
So even like that track back to reggae never really clicked for me. Um, this was one that I listened to initially a few months ago and liked it, and then listened to it again in the past week and just kind of was okay with it. So I'm not even sure where I land with it, but
Interesting.
yeah, it was just I liked it for what it was. I think it did what it does well, but what it does,
Mm-hmm.
I don't. It's just not for me.
I think that I have a similar initial take on reggae in general. In that, when I saw this on the list, and like it was like after Maxwell's album, right? I was like, okay, next up is this one, and then I saw it and I was reading about it. I was like, okay, here we go, because my one of my dislikes, I guess, about the reggae genre is that in a lot like reggaeton, like a lot of the songs just sound the same.
Hmm.
Um, I had a different take from this album. I actually really liked this one, and it surprised me. I really liked it, and I think I'm able to communicate why specifically, which is hey, that's why we're doing this thing, right? If I couldn't, there'd be no point. Um, the bass is like I love a good kind of wandering bass line, and in this record the bass actually mimicked the melody a lot, the lead melodies. Not in every instance, but when I'm listening to a song that I don't know all the words to, I typically hum along with the bass line. I don't typically hum along with lead guitar or even the melody. I'm usually just kind of like humming along the bass line. And this is a fun one to do that too when you've heard it, and it is repetitive in that the phrase will repeat. So you can get into it pretty quickly, and the phrase might be 2, 3, 4 bars long. So I found myself like listening to this in the car at work this week and just kind of like just vibing with the bass line and humming along with it. And it was enough to where like I'm not a Bob Marley fan either, in that like I'm just not familiar with it. I know the big songs but never sound it out. I I liked this album. Like this was my favorite reggae that I have ever heard.
Oh, okay.
Um and and I can appreciate it. Like I thought it was cool. Now the lyrics and the stuff that's I have no idea. We've
Yeah.
talked about it before. I'm a lyrics last guy, so none of that mattered to me. But the music itself, I could get down with that. Like it was cool. I enjoyed it. Um, Spongy Reggae is like the probably the biggest song on this album. Enough that there's a remix of it, and I think anyone like if the only reggae song that you listen to is Spongy Reggae, you'd probably have a pretty good sense of what it was,
Yeah.
of what reggae is. That it just seems like that to me. Utterance is another song that gets quite a bit of attention on this one. Um, yeah, I enjoyed it. What did you give this one?
A 3. Yeah,
Yeah,
I liked it just fine. I would probably put it on again if I was in the mood for it. Yeah.
yeah, I'd give this one a 3.5. Again, if this is one that I think I did. Like I would play this for my kids just for fun. You know what I mean? Like to put this on and have them experience it. Um, I could see like at a summer party putting this on and people not being familiar with it, but it's still like catching a
Yeah.
vibe
Yeah.
and doing well. It was fun. I enjoyed it. Um, the album is not like a huge commercial album. There's not a lot of notes on it, at least in the spots where I looked online. But it was ranked as the number third album of the year by NME in 1981, which is just a publication, a music critics publication. Like it had some attention. One thing we talked about as we were leading up to this is that the group Black Uhuru has a very fluid membership. Like
Hmm.
artists come in and out, and there's three people that are credited with being in the band: Michael Rose, Derek Simpson, and Puma Jones. But then as you look at the liner notes, I mean there's a bunch of other people that played on the album that aren't officially part of the band. So I think there's a creative force, and then they get a band to kind of flesh out their ideas the way they want to. But yeah, this is cool. They put out an album. It looks like they either came back together after quite a long hiatus, or released new music for the first time in 2018. It looked like. I didn't check that out, but it seems like the ghost of Black Uhuru is still around to some degree. So yeah, I would not be afraid to check this one out. It was cool. I enjoyed it. That was the album Red from Black Uhuru at 466. Kyle, let's talk in one of our recurring segments, um, what we're listening to this week besides the Rolling Stone greatest albums of all time. We talked last week about how this is a project that we're undertaking, but it doesn't mean that we don't listen for our own pleasure. So, Kyle, what have you been listening to this week?
Um, well, I'm gonna give you a scatter shot of a couple of things, just
Good. I kind of have a similar. Yep.
kind of rapid fire. So, as we're recording this, since the last time we've talked, we had the Grammy Awards, and I watched a little bit of it, but then caught up with all the awards and wanted to familiarize myself with some of the things that I just never really listened to before. So the first thing I did, the big winner this year, other than Kendrick, the big winner this year was Cowboy Carter, the Beyonce
Mhm.
album. So I went back and listened to that. I just had never listened to that. So I went back and listened to that this week. Uh, eh, not my thing. I don't have anything negative to say about it, but not my thing. I also caught the live performance by Ray during the
Hmm.
Grammys and went back and listened to her album, My 21st Century Blues, and loved that. Like
Yeah.
jazzy
Yeah.
soul R&B, just awesome, awesome
Hmm.
album. Definitely worth checking out. And then the last one is, I have never listened to The Cure. Like I just never got around to listening to The Cure, and they have some newer music out. So last night I listened to the new album from The Cure and liked it. I want to go back to it. I want to dig more into it. I kind of listened to it as I was in bed, like starting to fall asleep, so I didn't really digest it, but I liked it. So I'm interested in going back to that. But yeah, those are the kind of the three big ones that I've been listening to this week. What about you?
So I watched the Grammys. Also most of it, fell asleep for part of it, but I saw that. I thought that was a cool way that they did the best new artist nominees
Hmm.
to get them all perform. It was a surprise. Like it was a cool setup, and it was just like bang, 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 bang.
Yeah.
Um, so I watched that live. I liked that one. And then I watched. I fast forwarded through the boring parts, and I watched the performances again with my daughters the next day because they're big Chapel Roan fans,
Hmm.
big fans of Sabrina Carpenter. Like a lot of the artists, like they wanted to hear Shakira, which I was like, cool.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you can. Wow, what does she sound like? So they heard that, um, and that Ray one they love the what's the guy's name, Benson, whatever his name is.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
when he was doing the flips all over, they loved that.
Yeah.
But what like they didn't know who Ray was, and when they heard her sing, my oldest was like, "Dang,
Yeah.
she can sing!"
Yeah,
Like
she
it.
can.
So I hadn't heard her stuff before, and I love performances like that at the Grammys where I had, didn't know the artist and was blown away by what she can do. That
Yeah.
was cool.
Yeah. And that's
Um,
that's what it was for me. I'd never heard of her before and watched that performance and I was like, holy cow, yeah.
yeah, that girl can sing. They can sing like when they're holding the mic and their fingers are just like just tapping like randomly. It's like, dude,
Yeah.
you're in the zone. So much like you, what I listened to this week was inspired by the media that I consumed, and I went and revisited a lot of Kendrick Lamar after the Super Bowl. um, Specifically, my favorite album of his is Good Kid, Mad City that came out I think in was it what 2012 maybe. I think that's what it was. Um, but I listened to a lot of that for the first time in a while. I listened to some of the singles. I knew about the "They're Not Like Us" song, but hadn't listened to the whole thing all the way through. Um, and then I did my like I kind of was interested, but did not dig deep enough into the beef between
Yeah.
him and Drake.
Yeah.
It was just I'm just to me like I'm like part of me is conspiracy theorist minded enough to think like I mean one way that you can drum up some interest, excuse me, one way you can drum up some interest is to start a beef with somebody, and again that idea of publicity is good for anybody. Like they got people interested.
Oh yeah.
So some part of me wonders like if this is a legit thing. Now I will say that the allegations that are made by some of them are big enough that I don't think this is just like, hey, you want to talk shit about each other and sell more records. Like
Right.
I don't think that's happening. But I thought it was an interesting thing. So I listened to a lot of that. I also had a road trip up to Saranac Lake and had some time. And while I didn't listen to it, I watched Severance.
Uh,
Have you caught this at all?
I haven't. I don't have. It's Apple, right? It's
Dude.
Apple TV Plus. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah.
heard a lot about it, but I haven't. No.
I know this isn't a music thing, but I just have to talk about Severance for a second because I don't have anyone to talk about it with. Did you watch Lost?
Yep.
Okay. Do you remember the arc in Lost? There was a while where probably between like when they find the hatch and the numbers are being put in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're watching, you're like, what the hell is this about? Like, who is behind this and what is happening? All the way up to, I mean, the famous Not Penny's Boat, right?
Yeah.
Where that episode like blew my mind and I'm like, holy shit, everything is coming together and this is crazy. The best way I can describe Severance is like it lives in that part of Lost
Hmm.
of like I there's it's like a psychological mystery, like, and you're trying to figure out, and there's little Easter eggs that the most astute observers will catch on to, but everyone else you could just follow along for the story, and it's wild, and there's reveals at the end of episodes. You're like this is crazy, and oh man, it's really well acted. um I'm a fan of Severance right now. And my algorithm is helping me out. Like everything I'm seeing right now are like recaps of Severance, and did you catch this and did you catch that?
Yeah.
And I did the thing that I love to do with shows where I didn't watch the first season at all. And then I knew that the second season was out, so I got to binge watch the first season. And now the new season is like halfway done, so I'm all caught up. And now I get to catch the end of the second season,
Right.
at their release date, which is fun. But yeah, so my last couple weeks has been Severance and Kendrick Lamar, so not a bad way to spend some time.
Yeah, that's not bad.
I can't recommend either one of enough. So great. That was this week's segment of what else we're listening to and or watching. So awesome. Album 465 on the Rolling Stone Greatest Albums of All Time is The Best of the Classic Years from Nigerian musician King Sunny Ade. It was released in 2003. This is, I mean, it's a compilation, so the release date really isn't that important. King Sunny Ade is a juju or African pop musician. As I mentioned, he's from Nigeria. He is rather prolific. As we were just leading up to this, I played a game with Kyle called Over or Under. How many albums have been credited by being released by King Sunny Ade? And Kyle's opening guess was 30, to which I said over. And Kyle, you still haven't landed on it yet, but when I said a lot more, you countered with, is it triple digits, kind of like jokingly, and I said, yes. I don't know any other musician who's credited with 123 releases.
Ooh. I don't know. Is Bob Dylan up there?
I don't know. You might be. But yeah, this dude's put out some music. Yeah, I had some feelings on this. What were your thoughts on the best of the classic years?
I wonder if this is, we talked about how we've been kind of in sync with each other with the albums so far this week.
God.
I wonder if this is where we diverge.
Did you give this one a 5?
This is my 5.
Bullshit. Okay, go for it.
This is my 5, and I can explain exactly why. This album, listening to this album felt like listening to the band explore what music is. There was no like set structure to the songs. There was no there was nothing you could rely on that you could just grab onto and say this is the song, and it felt like they were discovering music as they were playing. Like they were searching for a beautiful sound together as a group of musicians, and it was a journey of discovery, and it feels loose and fun and not prescribed, not rigid. There was no regard for length of a song or holding to a specific form of what a song is supposed to be. It felt like, I don't want to say it felt like a jam, like a Grateful Dead jam, or some sort of like a Fish jam, where it was just kind of noodling around and they're just kind of like playing scales and that sort of thing. Like this felt like they were discovering musical expression as a group of, I don't know how many people are in King Sunny Ade's band, but this and I very specifically, I listened to this again in like November, so months ago now, and immediately gave it a 5. And right away, first listen, gave it a 5. And I came back to it this week with a fresh, trying to have a fresh mindset. Like, is this really a 5? Is this still really? And I listened to it again, and I couldn't give it anything else other than that. this yeah, this is my stuff. This is my jam. I loved this album. So tell me how much you hated it.
Yeah, okay. First, good for you. I'm happy for you. Love that for you, right? I didn't hate it. It's not that I hated it. Um, I could not distinguish one song from another. Um, you are much more of a jam band fan than I am. Um, I don't, and that what it, I'm comfortable saying that because I know that I am not a jam band fan. So whatever degree you appreciate jam bands is much more than I do. Um, in fact, I tell a story about the worst night I ever had out at the bar was some asshole played like 30 minutes of Fish on the jukebox at the bar, and after like 15 minutes I literally looked at my buddy and was like, I have to leave, like I cannot stay here anymore. So that sort of vibe is just not for me. I do appreciate what you said though. Like I can hear what you're talking about. Like it felt like they had an idea for what they wanted the song to be, and they're pressed record, and they're like, all right, cool, let's just play it until the wheels fall off,
Mm-hmm.
until we're out of ideas, until we feel like we've done it and there's nothing else we want to add. Like, um, so I mean, I can appreciate that. And you know, and talking about that, you referenced when we were talking about Maxwell, like the idea of capturing the live feel, and I think it, while it might not been recorded that way entirely, it definitely has that vibe, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we're experiencing, like you are thrown into them playing this music that one time, and who knows if it'll ever be played like that again,
Yep.
which is fun. So I I gave this one a 2 because there's not anything that I want to go back to. Um, but I was just talking to a friend about this who shared some music with me the other day. I gave it a 2, but there's nothing that I can point to it and say I didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like it about that. It's just not in my wheelhouse.
Not your thing. Yeah.
Um, yeah, not my thing. Um, were any of the songs like? Did any of the songs stick out to you that you like the best? I mean, the one that's most well known, I think, or probably the most famous, is the Synchro System. I think that is 18 minutes long.
Yeah.
Um, I read some stuff that were saying that like that song is a great encapsulation of pretty much everything he does and a great place to start, and it's just a recording that's held in high regard. Is
Yeah.
there anything else that
I
stuck out to you, or?
No, I didn't. I mean, I didn't note down any specific song. This was one that I put on and just went for the ride. Both times
Hmm.
I listened to it, and yeah, I just kind of put it on and went for the ride. I didn't necessarily note down any specific songs this time. No.
Hmm. Um, this one doesn't have any notes that I can find about like where it charted or sold, but I don't. That's not why this album is on the list. This is undoubtedly an album that's on the list because it did make a dent into some American culture and is credited with him as an artist, and his band and his sound is credited with bringing kind of Nigerian, that West African music into the American subconscious, or at least to some level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is on the list for those contributions, um, more than anything. I mean, you know, we could talk all day about like what we liked or what we didn't like, but I mean, they're great musicians and they own their sound. So shout out to King Sunny for bringing his sound to the masses. Good for him. Is there anything we missed on this one?
No. Nope.
That was King Sunny Ade's album, The Best of the Classic Years, at 465. The 464th highest ranked album on the greatest albums of all time list is the album 3 Plus 3 from the group The Isley Brothers. This album was released on August 7th, 1973 from T-Neck / Epic Records, produced by the Isley Brothers, Ronald, Rudolph, and O. Kelly. This is the 11th album in their discography. And by all accounts is a departure. I mean, the Isley Brothers had been around for a while. We were just talking right before this segment. You said that you didn't know there were.
I didn't realize how many Isley Brothers there were.
All right, so one of the stories with this album is that the traditional or first iterations of the Isley Brothers were the three brothers, and they came to notoriety years before this, doing some Motown stuff and in that vein. And as the group evolved and tried to stay relevant, it seems they added more people to the band. Can you guess how many people they added? Three. Hence the title of this album, 3+3. So this album it's the three original Isley Brothers, and then they added three more, like a brother-in-law or something like that. I don't remember entirely. Yeah, officially include younger brothers Ernie and Marvin and an in-law, Chris Jasper. I'll lead this one off.
Sure.
And not because I have a hot take. It's just all right. One thing I found interesting in this album is that like the cover art features a very Village People styled band, and by that I don't mean like in in offensive ethnic dress and or niche professions, but there's no cohesiveness to what they're wearing. It's very 70s. Appreciate that. But the thing that most drew my eye was the subtitle. That it says the Isley Brothers 3+3 at the top, and then right under that it says featuring that lady. So to me, that means that like they knew going into this that lady was a hit, and they were putting it right on the front. Like if you want to find that song, this is the album to get it on. I thought that was interesting. And then as I listened to it, everybody knows that song.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone knows that song. The rest of the songs on that album were in large part cover songs of other very well-known songs. The two that comes to mind was Listen to the Music.
Mm-hmm.
I forget who did that. Do you remember who did that one originally?
Doobie Brothers.
And
it was the Doobie Brothers.
Thank you. And then Steels and Crofts hit Summer Breeze, which is a banger. So I just thought it was strange, like, and to me a very Motown style, like we're gonna use songs that we know and love and we'll put our own spin on it. So much to the point that Summer Breeze the track is 6 minutes long, and it includes parts 1 and 2. And from what I gathered in listening to it, part 1 is the traditional song that we all know, like the traditional basically breakdown or makeup of it, and then the band kind of like jammed on the end of it a little bit more. Mm-hmm. That's the part 2 part from what I could tell. That lady also has the same thing, which I also think is kind of cool because I don't claim to know exactly when hip hop really started to take off. I've seen some documentaries and stuff, but part 2 would have been the part that early MCs would have cut and used, to sample and stuff.
Yeah.
As it was much more instrumental. But I was kind of, I don't know if disappointed is the right word, but I don't know. I guess I have a hard time on this list when it's like some of the best songs or most well-known songs on these albums are not theirs and they're just covering them.
Covers.
I'm just kind of like, okay. Now, I mentioned before that like this album was the first time that they added the 3 other members, and this was also coincidentally the first album of theirs that went platinum. So they clearly tapped into something that captured people's imagination, that 70s sort of disco funk feel a little bit in some of these songs. But what did you think of this one?
Well, I said I was going to bring this name back up tonight. But one of my favorite albums of the last 10 years or so was Awaken My Love, the Childish Gambino album. And as I listened to this album, I was like, oh yeah, like that's where Awaken My Love comes from, was this sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And because of that, I enjoyed this album more than I had thought I was going to. I don't know if I enjoyed it for what it was or enjoyed it for the obvious influence that it had on an album that I do love. It wasn't super strong for me, but I did enjoy the the kind of psychedelic twist on funk and soul and R&B. I liked seeing the term progressive soul because it did seem a little experimental, a little boundary pushing, which I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
But I would agree with your thoughts about so many songs being covers. It's not that the songs aren't good. It's not that they didn't put their own impressive and interesting spin on some of these songs. But when I get down to the greatest albums of all time, like to me, it feels like I would prioritize songs that were written for that group or for that album over covers. I think there's a place for covers. I think there's a way to have covers fit into this. But I would kind of echo that. And my biggest, strongest impression of it though was how it reminded me so much of that Childish Gambino album.
And now I just want to talk about Childish Gambino more. And I want to know what your experience is with that, because yeah, that would just be interesting. Um, but yeah, I would probably give this one. I guess in fairness, I'd give it a 3, because I mean that lady is a great song.
Mm-hmm.
Love that one. And listen to the music, and Summer Breeze is such a good song. That like I liked their version. Summer Breeze is a cool song because I don't think the chorus is the best part of that song. I think the verse is actually the best part of that song, but the chorus is what like people stick to. But I just love the way that they come back into the verse in that. Like I think it's so great. Yeah, I would give this one a 3. What would you give
Yeah.
it?
I went with a 3.5. I enjoyed it.
That would track. That would
Yeah.
track based on what you said. I mean, the album did well. I mentioned that did it win a Grammy? No, it went platinum. I can't remember if that's what I said or not. They're kind of meshing together. Um, but it sold a lot of records. It charted really well. It charted at number 8 on the Billboard Pop Albums. That lady went as high as number 2 on the Billboard Black Singles chart and 6 on the Pop Singles chart. Um, yeah, I mean it did well. People liked it. I do think there's something to be said for the band staying relevant, right? I respect that. Having a very long career and finding a way to do music that I'm presuming they were really proud of and loved
Mm-hmm.
and enjoyed, and also finding a way to make that relevant, to where people would want to seek it out too. So shout out to the Isley Brothers plus 3 for their album 3 plus 3. Laura Nero's Eli and the 13th Confession is the 463rd greatest album of all time, according to Rolling Stone. This album is Laura Nero's second release on March 13th, 1968. 46 minutes, 15 seconds long on Columbia Records, produced by Laura Nero and Charlie Kaleo. What did you think of this one, Kyle?
So I'm starting to start a new thing with the albums as I'm listening to them, where I'm playing some of them for my kids and getting their reactions from them, especially my daughter. She's the one that's like, I think is the budding music fan.
Mm-hmm.
And especially an album like this, she's very interested in female singers. So especially when we have a female lead artist album, I'll play it for her and see what she thinks. So I had this on in the car the other day, let it play for a couple of songs, and I said, well, what do you think about this? She goes, um, it kind of sounds like nonsense. It's beautiful, but it sounds like nonsense. And I was like, you know what? That's about right. That's
Yeah.
that's about right. And the more I listen to it, like, yeah, I liked the vocal melodies. Like the vocal melodies were really wild, like really jazzy, like unpredictable, wild vocal melodies. But I couldn't understand a damn word she was saying half the time.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
there were things that I liked about it for the first few songs, but then it kind of just seemed like, oh, this is what you're gonna do in every single song. So it kind of got boring.
Yes.
Like
Yep.
the tempo changes and
Uh-huh.
the shifting vibes within a song. Like it would start with as like a typical like 60s pop song, but then shift into kind of a, more of an R&B or a funk song with a different tempo, and then shift back again. And the first couple of times it was pretty cool, but then it was like every song did that. I'm like, all right, okay, so that's just your thing then. Like it was what it was. um but yeah, after my daughter said that, I was like, yeah, it's beautiful, but it's kind of nonsense.
Um, I think I had a similar takeaway. Like, I mean, I've thought about this, but whatever. This was almost so singer-songwriter to me that it was like too much inside baseball. Like, I didn't, I didn't enjoy. I didn't. The lyrics of this stuff is so in your face, or the melody, the vocals are so in your face. Like that's what I couldn't escape.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, there's this storytelling and weirdness, and I found like her vocal melodies and Seto to be annoying. I know I texted you a couple days ago. I was like,
Hmm.
this album's just annoying to me. Like
Yeah.
I don't like it. I mean, I am not a trained ear when it comes to these references, but like if you played one of her songs and then like maybe a Joni Mitchell song back to back, I don't know that I would be able to tell the difference. Um, and maybe that's just well, I'm sure it's my naivety in there, but like her voice sounded very familiar, but this is the first I've ever heard of her.
Hmm.
Um, what I one of the things I thought was interesting was that two of her songs were actually made much bigger when they were covered. Um, was it Three Dog Night covered Eli's Comin', and I forget who the other one. Oh, the Fifth Dimension took Stoned Soul Picnic. Um, Three Dog Night went as high as number 10 on the charts with Eli's Comin', and the Fifth Dimension went to number 3 with Soul Picnic, and they took Sweet Blindness to number 13.
Wow.
So when I consider like, because this is to me, especially in this crop of 10 albums, I kept trying to figure out like what about this album is causing it to be on this list. And the only thing I could figure out is that she's a singer-songwriter. She does have like you mentioned, this kind of placement within the folk jazz, especially the vocal stuff. And then her songs were beloved in other uses.
But yeah,
Nothing vibed with me.
no.
Like again, I had a hard time getting through this album.
Yeah. I
Yeah, I really really did.
as much as as much as I appreciated her vocal melodies because they were so crazy, I think what you were saying, yeah, it kind of hit home for me there too, where it was almost like she was showing off her
Yeah,
ability to sing those melodies, to the point where a lot of times the vocal the vocals, the singing and the melody kind of clashed with the music.
it reminds me of this line. I don't know if it's a quote. I know it's the album title of it's an album title from the band I love called Manchester Orchestra. The album's title is "You Brainstorm, I Brainstorm, but Genius Takes a Good Editor." And
Hmm.
I feel like in this one, like she could have used some producing help. Like, and I say that like also understanding that sometimes an artist just gets out there and they just want to do what they want to do and put their thoughts on paper, so to speak, and let it stand for what it is. Many musicians don't record a thing to sell records or for it to be loved. But I do think there's something to be said for other bands taking her stuff and making it more appreciated and beloved. Um, and it also reminds me when our first episode when we talked about Arcade Fire.
Mm.
And I said, like, just because you can play all the instruments doesn't mean you need to. Like, just because you can do all this stuff
Yeah.
doesn't mean you need to.
Yep.
Like, but again, as maybe she had the time of her life doing exactly what she wanted. So, and if that's the case, then good for her.
Mm-hmm.
She did pass away from ovarian cancer in, I think, the early 2000s, something like that. So she was relatively young, but she was fairly prolific and was a musician for quite a while. But yeah, I gave this one a 2. It's not one that I would return to. And that's probably kind. Like I said, I wouldn't return to it, but I could only take this one in very small doses.
Yeah. I was a 2.5, so
Yeah,
same
not
ballpark.
that far off.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Laura Nero, but we would not be with Eli confessing on this one. He's alone in this one. So also again, like, what is that title? Like, that's
Yeah.
how far down into the lore do you have to go to understand that? I don't. Whatever. I've given this album more time than I care to. Moving on.
Moving on.
Kyle, as we get into this one, this is one of those where I'm going to start this off by saying, according to Rolling Stone magazine, this is the 462nd greatest album of all time. It is The Gilded Palace of Sin by the Flying Burrito Brothers, and we have thoughts about this one. I think I probably have more thoughts because I chose to think about it more. It sounds like you gave it a listen and we're kind of like, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, I'm over it.
That's I mean,
So
yeah, I wrote down it's country.
why don't you? Kind of.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah. Yeah.
the Flying Burrito Brothers. Now, there's a comedian, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name, but he's on Instagram. He the thing that I found him on was he does this segment called Good Band Name, Bad Band Name.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
And yes, yeah. And this is one, I'm sure he's done this, but for no rhyme or reason, he'll be like, the Flying Burrito Brothers. That's a bad band name, right? And then he'll just move on.
Mm-hmm.
There are other bands that I've come across there where their name is enough of a deterrent for me to take seriously, and this is one of them. Like, the Flying Burrito, that's what, like, that tells me that you don't take yourself seriously, which some bands don't, and good for them. This is Graham Parsons and Chris Hillman's modern country music project that infused folk and country together with some gospel and psychedelic rock. Graham Parsons was in the Byrds, and this just seemed like a weird project to me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've talked. There was a couple albums on this chunk that we've done where, as best we can figure, they're on the list for their contributions that came after them. This album and this band are widely considered to have sort of broken down the doors for like bands like the Eagles to get into like that sort of pop country crossover, right? Like that lived in the country world and in the rock sort of pop world. I don't know how it did it because I didn't care for any of it. Well, actually, I take that back. I re-listened to it, and the song "Dark End of the Street" was also on Linda Ronstadt's album.
I wrote that down. Yeah.
Right, which I was like, okay, that song still holds up.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I was just, when you have two songs back to back called Hot Burrito Number 1 and Hot Burrito Number 2, again, like, you just kind of lost me. It like
if this was the band name and then they put out music like The Far Side, where they weren't taking themselves seriously, where it was very intentionally juvenile and just kind of silly and goofy, then that would be one thing. This didn't do anything for me. I don't even I honestly don't even know what to say about it because I just listened to it and it just was. It felt like a bunch of guys who weren't in country music did a country album.
It feels like a um there's a band called I think it was the Bronx. I think that was their name. That for some inexplicable reason in like the late aughts like put out a mariachi band album. They're like a punk post hardcore kind of like band, and
Mm-hmm.
they put out I think it's entitled like El Mariachi Bronx or something like that. Maybe I'll figure it out, but and it was like just this kind of goofy thing that the band did, right? Rather than create a new band, like they just put out this album and it was different. And again, I just listened to this thinking like this just seems like a thing that they caught their interest in and they just wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that I have a hard time taking seriously.
The big
Sorry,
yeah, the other big thing that I wrote down with this album, and it isn't even related to the music itself, but um, I noticed a lot of the similarities. I noticed a lot of similarities to that Jefferson Airplane album that we listened to last week with the
mm-hmm,
recording techniques. So this is the same like
mm-hmm,
1968, 69, somewhere in there with when they were first experimenting with with stereo recording. And one thing that I did find interesting was that they played with panning the vocals in interesting in different ways where they would pan the lead vocal like hard left and then the harmony to that hard right, so you've got like one in each ear,
mm-hmm.
and it had an interesting effect that I found kind of interesting to listen to. Um, but as a whole, that wasn't enough to make me actually like the album.
Yeah. I I mean the album didn't do well commercially, which as we've talked about before, it isn't an indicator. You know, you don't have to go 10 times platinum to be on this list. That's not what this isn't the 500 best-selling albums of all time. That would be a much different list. Um, but you know, I mean, artists like Travis Tritt, Vince Gill, Alan Jackson, Clint Black, and Randy Travis all cite this album as an influence on their music. So we're talking about late 80s, 90s country.
Mm-hmm.
I already mentioned the Eagles. Um, I, so again, like I mean, I'll say this: they're better musicians than I am. The slide guitar, steel guitar on there is good, which is what Sneaky Pete Einhaus radical pedal steel guitar was cited in this one. They're much so you know how dare I shit talk them? You know what I mean? um, but like this one doesn't resonate with me, and when I think of it in those terms, it's like I'm not the biggest country music fan, so it's I guess it's not a surprise to me that like this sort of bridge version of country music didn't strike a chord with me either. Um, Because if we're going down the rabbit hole into music that had a big impact on country, then I guess you've kind of lost me already.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I'd be interested to talk to a person that says like I am a fan of this album and have them tell us why. That would be cool. So if you're out there and you love the Flying Burrito Brothers, like please drop us a line.
Yeah, let us know.
Um, yeah, teach us something. Because this album, The Gilded Palace of Sin from the Flying Burrito Brothers, did not really teach me anything in that 462. The 461st greatest album of all time, and rounding out this episode is Bon Iver's album For Emma Forever Ago. Kyle, did you know that Bon Iver stands for, or I just translated to Good Winter in French? I bet you didn't, Kyle. I bet you didn't know that Bon Iver translates to Good Winter in French. That's because you're not really in on the scene, Kyle. Um, this album was released on July 8th. Sorry, I just remember that was what everyone talked about when this album came out. Did you know that it means good winter? Um, This album was released on July 8th of 2007, not in the winter. Um, this is the debut album from the indie folk band on Jaguar Records. Justin Vernon, who, as you may know, has gone on to do quite a bit of stuff. Um, the last I heard of him, I think I just saw that he's releasing another album this year. Like literally just announced maybe within the last week or so. But the last I heard of him before this was he was a featured player and influencer on either Folklore or Evermore from Taylor Swift.
Hmm.
I can't remember which one. Um, so shame on me for not knowing. But this album is 37 minutes and 14 seconds long, produced by himself. Interesting. I don't know if you read this. He was going through some stuff in his life. I think he moved back home to the North Midwest in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and kind of locked himself in a cabin or house or whatever, and decided to put some songs together and kind of emerged with this album, which caught on. Kyle, are you now, or have you ever been a fan of Bon Iver and specifically this album?
Uh, Bon Iver is a name that's always been out there for me, but I've never really listened to. Um, and I guess the next time that I'm like super depressed and want to wallow in it, I'll put this on. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
nah, nah.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of good sounds to it. There's a lot of interesting subtle layers that made it almost interesting to listen to, but the songs don't go anywhere. They don't
Mm-hmm.
build to anything. They don't resolve into anything. They
Mm-hmm.
oh, it was painful. I mean, every song I had anticipation for because it would sound really good, but then it would just kind of just keep going and not get anywhere and just yeah, and then it's just done and you're like, "Oh, that's it?" That was it.
Yeah. This is an album and an artist that as an indie, I suppose, music fan in college, right? This was July of 2007, so it would have been right after my senior year of college, our senior year of college, I guess. Both of us kind of took a little bit different path, but um, this is one that I remember the scene kids talking about. And I listened to it, and this very much fell into the um, Death Cab um, sort of genre for me. Like, I'm gonna name drop a couple, but like Fleet Foxes, My Morning Jacket, like really indie bands that I was just like,
Sufjan
it,
Stevens, like yeah.
yeah, like this is boring. Like, right, this is Bell and Sebastian released 10 minutes or 10 years later,
Yeah.
and I know we talked about that before, like how Bell and Sebastian were cited almost like too much, and it became sort of a meme of itself for influencing bands like Bon Iver, I guess. Um, so when I listened to this, I like, even as a self-described emo kid myself, I was like, this is just sad. Like, and again, I thought the music was boring. It,
I
I don't know. Like,
the big difference to me, the big difference between this and like emo is this is very self-pitying.
mm,
Emo and I'm to a degree there is that in emo music as well, but this was very much like not only do I feel bad, but I feel bad for myself, and I feel bad about feeling bad for myself, and I feel bad about feeling bad about feeling bad for my like it's just so just centered on himself that it just
which sure, and when you read like the story of this album, like I mean, he was struggling with a lot of shit. So and when you lock yourself in there and you're working through stuff, like I mean, you're kind of just left with that. So that I agree with you. Speaking from my perspective, that's not why I don't like it. You talked about the music. I just don't like the music. I
Yeah.
guess I also have a problem with um, like his consistent falsetto.
That yeah.
I don't know. Like
That
I
yeah.
suppose I just have a problem with that. Like I want it's so soft and it's hard to understand, and I just wanted something different. This is another one of those that I would chalk up to after all that. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I would also challenge in the same vein, if you care to, I hope you do, go back and listen to my take on the Bell and Sebastian record. I don't I would challenge anyone that says that they love Bon Iver to, in a meaningful way, tell me why.
Like I
And
could see.
all I could think of is like someone would really resonate
Yeah.
with his story, I guess, and the lyrics.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing about the music, right? That not even about the vibe that I can't imagine anyone being like, yeah, I love
Hmm.
this.
Yeah.
Like,
And that was what I came to as well. Is like the only way I can imagine liking this is like I said, if I were like super depressed and wanted to just wallow in it, then sure. But outside of that, I I can't imagine I can't imagine finding myself enjoying this album in any other situation.
right. And I'm as you're saying that, I'm thinking to myself like, what did I score it? How would I rate it? And I couch that my rating of it again by saying, and maybe I don't know why I'm saying this more tonight, but like he's a much better musician than I am. I can't write songs at all. Um,
Yeah.
at least not like this. But I would give this one like a one. Like I actively don't like it.
Hmm.
Like it's yes, I would skip it, but I don't get it. I don't like it at all.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I went with a
you
2.
gave it a three.
No,
Oh damn
no, I went.
it.
I went with a 2. Um, and yeah, I mean, I do feel like you were saying too. uh, at least once every episode, I have to reiterate the fact that I'm not a professional music critic, and I'm not trying to pretend to be one. I'm not trying to like give an objective opinion about you know the value of the album. I'm just reacting to
Hmm?
this as a music fan, and in that way, this album didn't do anything for me. So yeah, 2.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said before, I mean I respect it. Just nope, it's a one for me. Sorry, that was not a good winter. Um, and we were just talking before we wrapped this up, like how it seems like the albums at the 11th digit, I guess, or at the one, the last album of each episode have just been clunkers the last couple weeks.
Yeah.
Just to recap, there was this one from Bon Iver, there was the Jefferson Airplane album, whatever, Bell and Sebastian, which I've
Yeah.
had many thoughts of about that, and then
Harry
what was the one
Styles. Harry
before that?
Styles is the outlier
Harry Styles.
there.
Okay,
That's the
so since
outlier.
Harry Styles,
Yeah.
we haven't had a great album to end on. Next year or next week, it doesn't look like we really will either. Um, but yeah, that was this week's episode of going over the music. You want to get right into the I've got one better segment?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to lead us off?
Sure. All right. So I've got one better, and I hesitate to say better because it's actually for an album that I did enjoy this week. So
Sure.
it's more of maybe like if you liked this, try this too. And it's
I'll
for
raise you one.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll raise you one. I'll raise you one. So it's for the Maxwell album, that Black Summer's Night,
Uh-huh.
which I really enjoyed. If you enjoyed that and you want something that is just as good or maybe better, listen to the live album of covers that T-Pain put out. I
Yes.
am not kidding. That
I
was
don't think
something
you are.
that I just randomly came across a while ago. I think it came out last year. It came out in 2024,
Is
2023,
that the one
2024.
that he did War Pigs
Yep,
on?
yep, he did War Pigs on it.
Okay, yeah.
That dude can
You think?
sing. He
Yeah,
can
Duke can sing. Yep.
sing. And as a live album with a full band, my only knock on it is that it is covers. There's some
Uh-huh.
there's some fantastic covers on it, but as I was listening to that Maxwell album, I was like, yes, this is like the live, like one of the things that I said about that album when we were talking about it was how I appreciated the feel of listening to a live performance. Like it felt like it was recorded, tracked live, that sort of thing. And so this live T-Pain album is like that next step where it actually is live in front of an audience, a performance. I've been going back to that album repeatedly for a few months, for quite a while now. There are just some absolutely fantastic covers on that album. Like you said, War Pigs. He covers Chris Stapleton's Tennessee Whiskey that like makes me
Hmm.
actually like that song. There's just there's so many good songs on that album, and T Pain to me was always just that dude that did all the auto tune stuff. And to hear him perform live, it's good. It's good.
Nice. That's a solid pick. I like the idea of there's an album you enjoyed and it made you also think of another
Mm-hmm.
album that you enjoyed. I think that's a good way of looking at this. I unfortunately did not take that route. Um, I have better record than the Flying Burrito Brothers. And I think that only speaks to my disdain for the Bon Iver album. There was nothing redeeming in that album enough where I could connect it to another one of a similar style and go like, yeah, I like this better. Um, I think that the band Limbeck's album "Let Me Come Home" is a better album than the Flying Burrito Brothers, and the primary reason why I thought of this album in the first place is because there is a track on the Flying Burrito Brothers album called Sin City. And there is also a track on the Limbeck album called Sin City. They are not the same song, but when I saw it, I was like, I know a song by that name. I wonder what the hell. So I listened to that again, the Limbeck album again. I don't know if you're familiar with Limbeck at all.
No.
Okay. So if memory serves correctly, Limbeck actually played at Chad from Moonfound Glory's wedding. Like they're the band that I think when he married Haley Williams from Paramore. I think this is. I know that they played at a Newfound Glory band member's wedding. I think it was his, but I don't remember. Like they asked Limbeck to play, and Limbeck is not a pop punk band. This album in particular has a country tilt to it, but not in the same way that the Flying Burrito Brothers do. I would say that this is like I don't know how to describe it honestly. There's a lot of acoustic guitar, but it's fleshed out with the band. Um, some of the songs tell a story. Some of them are really fun. Some of them are silly. Um, song Sin City is a really good one. It's just like a good vibe song. There's one called Names for Dogs, which is kind of like a very folky guitar noodling song about, like, the best I could tell, like his family and kind of how they've existed. Um, and then there's a song at the end called I Saw You Laughing, which is like it's just a really great kind of back of an album, slower, just a sweet song. So like again, I don't think it's like it didn't. It reminded me of a band that I kind of like, and I hadn't listened to this one in a while, but like just enough of that folky country song to go or sound to say like, man, this should be on there instead. I think this is better.
Hmm.
I think it's a better album. So give that Limbeck record Let Me Come Home a spin
Yeah.
and revel in its superiority to freaking Flying Burrito Brothers. As my dad likes to say, "Oh my aching ass." Um, anyways, that was We've Got One Better, or also known as we're gonna up the ante. So I
Hmm.
like that. Um, yeah, sweet. Next week, our next episode, we're gonna cover the albums. We're not through the top 50 yet, so we're covering I'm sorry, 460 through 451.
Yeah.
Um, that'll be 50 albums. Maybe, yeah, we'll talk more about
Yeah.
our
We'll
take
maybe
on
have
the
to
first 50 albums
do a
next
recap of the
next
first
episode.
50. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I don't know. I'm hoping that the next 10 are. This will be interesting too as we kind of lead into this. The next 10 are ones that I'll be listening through for the first time for.
Like this
Like
upcoming 10.
yes,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Like when we started recording these, I stopped at this much because I didn't want to get so far away.
Right.
Um, so I'll be going into these with pretty fresh eyes. So I'm excited to get back into that and maybe be motivated to more motivated even to really to listen to them and get into them a little bit. So I'm excited for the next group. But all right, Kyle. Till next time.
All right.
Nailed it.